Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is you don't have to have the answers. You just have to be willing to feel into it. And it comes off of a magnificent post that you, Bridgie, wrote that speaks to the hearts and minds of so many, to the point where your post has gone viral. And so what that just says is that it's such a collective resonance in the words and the heart and the feeling and the vibration of that post. So we would all really love for you to read it to us and then just put yourself in that moment as you're contemplating it and writing it and where that kind of came from within you.
Yeah, okay, I'll read it first and then we'll pull it apart. So the first kind of tile image says, "While I tuck my children into their warm beds, another mother with dwindling food supplies is preparing her children's beds in a subway bomb shelter. Newborn babies are waking to the sirens of war. Make it make sense." And then I go on to say, "The juxtaposition I'm posting in my stories today feels particularly jarring. The devastating news coming out of Ukraine, then my toddler helping me wash the car. Russians protesting their government. My other daughter's first little love notes to her bestie. The tears and the privilege, the overwhelm and the responsibility. Mind and heart there and here. And still we must feed our children, tend our home and our work. Holding on to our own vision while opening our hearts wide enough to feel the ache of humanity and give whatever we can in thoughts, deeds or money. Resisting intellectualizing or having all the answers. Sending love to all who need it right now." And so that came up because that day I'd obviously posted my stories and I was about to go to bed and I was exhausted on Friday night and I thought, no, I can't leave this unsaid. I feel like this needs to be said because otherwise I'm just giving a cursory glance at something that's, pretty horrific that's unfolding on the other side of the world. And so I thought, no, I'm going to write this post. And so I write it, put it up, go to bed, wake up, and it's been shared hundreds of times. And I think we're 2 or 3 days later now, and it's been shared over 1,000 times, and it's still circulating. And I think what that says is that we don't need to be an expert in geopolitics. We don't need to have read every conspiracy theory. We don't need to know who's right and who's wrong and who's the hero and who's the villain. We just need to listen to our hearts and that part of us that feels the humanity of another and can, put our children to bed in a country relatively safe and with a roof over our head that, the house that likely is not going to be invaded tomorrow. And we take all of that for granted. And I think we know this intellectually, but I think when we have an experience of witnessing what's happening and what's unfolding in Europe at the moment, it brings it all home, and it can be really easy to let the overwhelming nature of it mean that you don't want to engage because it's too much. But I think on some level, we need to have a foot in it, or some part of ourselves touch into that kind of experience of another and be reminded of our privilege, be reminded of our responsibility that comes with that privilege in terms of how we use this one precious life, the way we've been born into a country that's, largely democratic, and also with the way that we raise our children. And I think if we don't confront ourselves with the uncomfortable like this, then we miss those opportunities. And I think that's what this is. It's an opportunity.
So when we scan over so many of the comments that readers have left on your post, what seems to come up over and over again is what a struggle it is to be able to hold that knowledge and open yourself into seeing it, reading it, hearing about it, looking.
Yeah.
And the struggle between being able to hold that in a human heart and body and then almost do what your post is talking about, which is transpose that experience onto your own life and your own children, and then have this struggle between, as your post said, I can't even make it make sense. I can't place it. I'm ping-ponging. I'm having trouble being there and here, and I can't regulate and be present.
Yeah.
In my life and with just the horrors that are taking place. I mean, how do you find yourself able to do that?
With this is where I become acutely aware of my media consumption, because this kind of, any kind of big media event, which a war is, which COVID is and was, can become addictive. Our brains can kind of hit like this. We want to get our fix with the latest update, right? Even if we can do nothing about it. And so I think the dance with something like this is finding out just enough to be aware, but not so much that you're kind of going down a rabbit hole of, conspiracy theory or who's right and who's wrong, or, just the morbid nature of watching violence unfold, right? So I think it's just becoming very aware of how your behavior is being shaped by this so that you can be unboundaried.
What do you mean about that, or by that, how your behavior is being shaped?
Because once you start looking at these articles, at the footage coming through, and like I know TikTok's like, not that I'm on TikTok, but lots of stuff's getting reshared from TikTok. You could just sit there for hours just watching what's coming out because it's unfolding in real time. But you've got to ask yourself, how is this of benefit to me and my family and my vision for what's important to me and to us, versus how meaningful it is to me to dedicate that time there. Like, is it helping the cause by me endlessly consuming this? No, because I'm not actively doing anything in response to it. I'm just getting further and further into my own sense of helplessness and lack of control, because we don't have control and influence over it, right? I think it's important to look at, in the context of issues like these, like, what is my circle of influence? And taking in just enough information for it to be meaningful to your circle of influence, and no more. Because your circle of influence is your family, your community, your business, whatever that looks like for you. And so there's a responsibility to have some level of awareness for your own sense of well-being and for your family vision and for what you want to communicate to your children, and maybe combat any misinformation that they're getting. But beyond that, I think we just need to be careful like any kind of, media consumption of, is this helpful or is this harmful? Is this adaptive or maladaptive now?
Yeah. I love that. Is this helpful and adaptive, or is this unhelpful and unadaptive? Is that what you said?
Yeah. And also we've got to remember too, like, so much of the world now, if you give in the last 2 years, we're operating in a stress response. Like our nervous systems, for many of us, it's pinging. So COVID's kind of on the, it's peaked, right? Like kind of we're coming off like the drip, the daily drip of the daily numbers, right? Which some people have become very hooked on. In terms of their nervous systems and the stress, like cocktail that brings up. And so it can be looking for the next thing. What's the next little stress cocktail? Well, basically the stress cocktail that's already existing in me. What's the next hit I can get to get those same feelings? And it's often unconscious like that. But that neurochemistry has been set up for months and months, if not years. And so we also need to be mindful that we're not allowing this to take up that kind of space. This podcast is brought to you by Honey Club and Reimagining Motherhood, your spaces for intimacy and feminine embodiment and conscious parenting and inspiring motherhood. Come join us at julietanner.love and bridgetwood.life.
I also love that one of the posts or one of the comments on your post was really just talking around how what she got out of your post and what she was resonating with was how to keep your heart open at a time like this, rather than allowing or living with your privilege disassociating you from the lived experience of others. And you do that kind of shut down, close down, switch off. It's too hard. I can't know about it. I haven't got the energy, blah, blah, blah. Insert the privilege that you have to be able to disassociate.
Do that.
Yeah. Which I was at Coffee with Mums this morning, and that was the narrative I was hearing. And I can witness that narrative in myself. I mean, this is the thing, right? When you're born into privilege, it's constantly a process of going, whoa, holy moly, there's my privilege again. Whoa, let me just check that for a minute and work out what I want to do here consciously.
Yeah.
What is your secret, or how do you see it that we're able to balance that disassociation of privilege versus having a heart that's open to connect to another mother over the other side of the world, having a completely different lived experience?
I would also add another version of what the dissociation looks like what another protective mechanism looks like, which is immediately intellectualizing it and kind of saying, which is lots of people doing, lots of people saying, oh, this is all just, look into the World Economic Forum, it's totally rigged. This is, this was always planned. This was always a plan to kind of, overtake Ukraine, and they're all kind of interconnected, and, people pushing that kind of narrative as if to say, wake up, you don't even know how this is, you're another sheep because you don't understand the context of this and you're buying into it. What that very thing does is completely disconnect from the human experience, which, whether you're right or wrong, is beside the point, because people are still dying. Mothers are still putting their kids to sleep in bomb shelters. So I don't really give a fuck whether you think it's a conspiracy theory or it's a completely legitimate response by the Western nations. The human impact is the same. But what can happen as a way to not feel that, there can be this kind of self-righteous, and it happens on both sides. It happens on the conspiracy theory side versus the geopolitical expert who, can't stand Russia and all of that, right? On both sides, they both invite you to not feel
To skim over the harm.
to skim over the harm.
Mm.
And so what helps me keep my heart open is a lot of what my post said, which was just actually trying for a second to put myself in what that might be like as a lived experience. You know, of like, there's mothers that look just like me. Like there's a mother that had her baby in like, you know, an ergo carrier with a little beanie on, like hopping to climb down to the, you know, to the subway, right? Like these are mothers who move about their day the way that you move about your day. Yesterday, that's what they were doing. Today, they're going to seek shelter from bombs.
Mm.
And I think it's the practice of seeing yourself in that person that allows you to open your heart and let it flow through you, as opposed to let the walls come up and dissociate from whatever mind habit you want to, whether that's the overwhelm and I just can't handle it, or it's the I know all the answers, therefore, you know, rough, like whatever, right?
Yeah, I get it. So how are you finding yourself? I guess the question really is, how do you find yourself as a Western white woman of privilege sitting with, as your post said, the juxtaposition of I'm practicing and consciously consuming media and practicing opening my heart and feeling another human's lived experience with, you know, oh, look at my daughter washing my brand new car. And you just, I don't know, wrote your first sentence at school. That's incredible.
Yeah.
But how are you as a human doing
that? There's a bit of compartmentalization. Like, so I think it was maybe Saturday. I don't know when it was, but my older kids are busy doing something and my toddler had a nap. So I thought, okay, I have some time here without responsibility for children. So I'm going to have a look. I'm going to delve into it. I'm going to be moved by this. Excuse me. And that was when, you know, I allowed myself to watch things and feel it and not look away. And that was almost like my pocket of time that I dedicated to being moved by it, so then I could be fully in it. I wasn't like trying to parent and trying to watch this, and therefore because I've got like one eye on my child, I'm not letting myself be actually moved by this. I'm kind of not with it.
So powerful.
Because you kind of can't be, because if you're conscious of
100%, like, but I just love that you pulled that out. You know, like I wasn't even thinking about it until you said that, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I'm not all there when I'm also cooking the dinner and getting the snacks and getting asked for this. Like I'm not all there.
Yeah.
So I think that conscious creation of time is helpful. And then because I've allowed it to move me and I feel like I've connected to it, and then I can then move about my day and reconcile the parts of me that feels the privilege or feels like that, like, who am I to complain about this? Because I think we all, because we can care about what's going on in the world and also have our own challenges that, yes, might pale in comparison, because we're human. We don't want to negate our challenge because there's also greater challenge out in the world. Right?
Like being able just to be with both rather than casting judgment, shaming, or shutting up or shutting down.
Yeah.
Just actually what the invitation that I hear from you is just actually create time to sit in both.
Yeah, to actually, and which is like that, sitting in that like liminal space in between, or being in that complexity and noticing the parts of you that want to leave it or want to resolve the tension of it, and just practice staying there a little bit longer.
That's such beautiful advice.
So yeah, it's not a podcast with answers, it's just a podcast with invitations, this one, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
we don't have to have the answers for this. And what I've also found myself doing is connecting with, you know, friends of mine who perhaps might have grown up in Ukraine, or I've got other friends who grew up in Poland, and just as a way to kind of understand the way of life in many of these Eastern European countries, and the context with which the people are responding in the way that they're responding, so that I can feel into and become more aware as well. And that helps to also understand these people's lived experience a little bit more.
Thank you so much for, one, putting words to an experience that perhaps many of us couldn't, but also just for offering us just a moment to pause and reflect and decide how we wish to consciously move forwards and how we hold ourselves and be in our lived experience of moving forwards, and knowing that has ripples then onto our kids' lived experience as well. So I just also want to say thank you for the invitation just to open it up.
Thank you. And I want to add too, there's lots of ways to obviously contribute to this issue. Like you can reach out to people who have family there. Like I've dropped a bunch of flowers off to a friend of mine whose family's Ukrainian, and you might just choose to give to the Red Cross. But I would also notice the part of you that if your urge is to just give all of this, also notice, well, what's that like? What are you not feeling in immediately just giving? Because sometimes we can just give something and feel like, oh, we've done our thing, I don't have to feel that anymore. Whereas I think we need to moderate that too. Like, of course, be generous and do whatever, give in whatever way feels meaningful to you, but also notice what comes up in you when if that's your reflex as well.
Thank you, Bridgie. So we love and invite any conversation you have on reflections of our podcast, or if you would like us to dive into a particular content or topic or question, so please reach out to us at nourishingthemother.com.au or Nourishing the Mother on Instagram and Facebook. And to connect with you, Bridget.
Yeah, it's bridgetwood.life. And you, Jules?
Is julietenner.love.
Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.